Welcome to this webinar, Learn at Work, presented by the journal Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. I'm Karen Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'll be the moderator for today's very interesting webinar. So I'm going to turn it over now to our speaker. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Jacobs, for introducing me and for having the opportunity for me to join this webinar and to share our knowledge. I have prepared a presentation and it's going to take about, I think, 30 minutes, perhaps 40 minutes. I'm not sure about that. It depends a little bit on how fast we will go through the different slides. And it is the goal today to share our knowledge about a systematic review that we have performed a few months ago about the efficacy and the efficiency of disability management programs in job retention and job reintegration. I'm the presenter now today, but I'm not the only author of this article. I did it together with Marlies, who was at that time a master's student, occupational therapy, a master's student of mine. And we performed this study together with Saskia de Kuman and François Perle. And these are persons from the National Institute of Health and Disability Insurance, because they were actually the persons who asked us to do this study. And the last person, Ludgard Braakman, was an occupational medicine who was involved because she was very interested in the topic. So I am from Ghent University. Ghent University is a university in Belgium, in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium. And just to give you a small idea of where we are, this is Europe. We are here in the middle, somewhere in Brussels is our main capital. We live in Ghent and I also work in Ghent. You also see a lot of other cities in Europe, and you have a little bit an idea of where we are. For instance, 310 kilometers from London. If we compare it with Boston, we are 6,343 kilometers from each other, which makes it very interesting that through the technology of webinar, we can share this knowledge. A little bit about the city in which I live and work. It's in Belgium, as I said before, in Ghent. And this is really a student city because more than 70,000 students are in our city. That means that there are more students than inhabitants of the city. And that makes it very interesting to be there in this knowledge hub. We have a lot of international students. Also, we have about 100 to 200 students a year coming from the United States studying with us and vice versa. So we have a strong collaboration with a lot of other countries as well. And we have a very rich history, and we have in total 11 faculties, from arts and philosophy to law and criminology, educational sciences, pharmaceutical, and so forth. And I'm in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, because as an OT, we are next to the PTs, next to nursing, next to psychology and so forth, and the medicine. So we have a lot of interprofessional collaboration in our university. That makes it very interesting to do some research for us. When I make a presentation or when I do a presentation, our university asks always to show the ranking. Worldwide, we are on 61. Nationwide, we are the first on the Shanghai ranking, which is interesting for us to be on this first place. But anyway, I'm here to talk about our study. And here you see a screenshot from the article that has been published in Work. the efficacy and efficiency of disability management in job retention and job reintegration. We did, as said before, a systematic review. Now, just a short introduction. If we look at the figures from unemployment due to disability in Europe, then approximately 40 million persons have disabilities. And of these 40 million persons, 35 is unemployed, which is a huge amount of people. These persons with disabilities are 2 to 3 times more likely to be unemployed than others. So we should do something, and our government has understood it very well. And our government, actually a part of the government, which is the NIDI, is the National Institute of Health and Disability Insurance, aims to reduce this number by organizing a disability management program. And in this management program, healthcare professionals and other stakeholders are trained to become a licensed return to work coordinator. So it is our government who took the initiative to organize a disability management program. And this has a lot of advantages because it's not locally organized, it's really organized on the national level. So before taking that risk of organizing a disability management program as a government, they wanted us to gather some evidence regarding the efficacy and the efficiency of such programs. And this is what we did. So looking at a definition of disability management, and this is a definition of Williams and co-workers, disability management is some kind of a systematic and constructive method associated with the biopsychosocial model to ensure job retention and job reintegration in competitive employment for individuals with a temporary disability. So this is a definition. It's a good definition. It was our starting point to organize a disability management program. Now, the most important aspect is, what do we know now about disability management before we did our systematic review? And basically, there are 10 important principles. And these 10 important principles are described by Russo and Ines in 2002. It's a little bit old, but they are still good 10 principles. And they are described there at the right side. Disability management involves 10 principles, and the first one is you should start very early. The moment that the person has a disability or has problems or has a disease which can become a chronic disease and so forth, you should start in a very early phase with an intervention to be sure that the person can go to his job again. Engagement, the second one, of all stakeholders in the process is important. And all stakeholders, that means the person with a disability himself, of course, professionals such as occupational therapists, physiotherapists, psychologists, but also the person who offers the job. So not only the person who works there, but also the person who is responsible for offering the job to the client. So this is important. The more stakeholders, the better. And in our case, we have also involved our government. So this is very good. The third point, the primary goal is job retention or job reintegration, conform to the individual needs and demands of the job. So this is also a very important aspect, because if you want to get something back to the job or someone back to the job, you need to be sure that he has the opportunities and the capacities to do the job, and the demands from the job must be adapted to the capacities of the individual. Recognition of the workplace to the most effective place for reintegration is also an important principle. Retain the dignity of the employees is important. A sixth aspect, consultation and communication between all stakeholders in all stages of the process. It's good to, as the second point points out, engagement of all the stakeholders is important, but there should be a very good communication between all these stakeholders. So you need to have meetings, you need to have some kind of communication structures to get the job retention and job reintegration on the run and on the go. Then the seventh point is return to work should be aimed at the highest level possible, with attention to some aspects. In the most ideal way, we should aim for the same task, same job, with the same employer. But that's not always possible, of course. Sometimes you have to aim for alternative tasks, new jobs, and even other employers. So that is the last alternative. The eighth point, assignment of meaningful task to the concerned employee is a very important aspect. Point number 9, consideration to graduate the return to work in terms of task or time. And then the 10th principle, individual reintegration associated to workplace-based occupational health and safety programs. So these are the 10 principles, and it's some kind like the Holy Grail or the Bible, which we should pay attention to before implementing a management program. So this was published in the Australian Occupational Therapy International Journal in 2002. Now, these 10 principles served also as a basis to define disability management according to NIDMAR. And NIDMAR is the Canadian National Institute of Disability and Research. And we, as a government, we followed the guidelines from the National Institute of Canada. So this is how we started with implementing our disability management program. We started from the 10 principles and we followed the guidelines from the NIDMAR. Now, we know from the literature that by applying these 10 principles, that there is an impact on the micro, the meso, and on the macro level. On the micro level, we know, and there is evidence, that returning to work promotes health, community integration, and participation. And in addition, there is strong evidence that work has a positive influence on the quality of life, also on the social status, the occupational identity, and provided, of course, that there is a good person-job fit. If there is no good person-job fit, all the above described characteristics are not attainable anymore. So, but we know on the micro level there is impact. Also on the meso level, on the level of the companies, there is evidence, although very little, but the company benefits by reducing costs of recruitment, selection and training, productivity loss, absenteeism, and losing qualities and skills. So there is some benefit for the company if there is a good disability management program based on the 10 principles. And also on the macro level, disability management could provide an answer to the current issues in our society, because there is an emerging problem of chronic conditions, multimorbidity and so forth, people with different conditions, people with long-term conditions and so forth. So there is, due to disability management programs, there is an answer to this issue in society. So we know that there are advantages from disability management programs, but this is something that wasn't investigated in a structured and in a systematic way. So this is why we wanted to do this research program, because we had the gap. There was no clear overview of the efficacy and the efficiency of disability management programs, and therefore we performed a systematic review on these two topics. We also were not aware about what are the successful components of such programs. So therefore, this was our research aim and research gap. The method that we used was, as I told you before, a systematic review, and we reviewed the Cochrane. We reviewed also on the search engines PubMed, Google Scholar, and Web of Science. We made a PICO, which is, I guess, everyone is familiar with. So we decided the participants is people that are in job retention or job reintegration. The intervention was disability management according to the 10 principles. The C comparison, we didn't compare it with any intervention, so we just wanted to have an idea of the disability management program, and the outcome was the efficacy and the efficiency of these programs. So this was our PICO, and we made actually some kind of a data extraction tool, as you can see it on the right side of the screen, with some in and exclusion criteria, and 2 independent researchers searched all the engines, as I told before, and in or excluded the articles based on this data extraction tool. So we included people that were unfit to work or not in the possibility to continue competitive employment. Studies about this aspect we included in the study. We included, regarding interventions, the disability management programs, the NIDMAR method programs, and at least 1 or more of the 10 principles of Russo and Ines should be described in the abstract. The comparison, no interventions. Other interventions could be included. The outcomes was the effectivity, efficiency, components of disability management, because we wanted to see what components are predictive for effectivity and for efficiency, and what success factors were described. And we included all kinds of designs, because we were afraid that by only including, for instance, randomized controlled trials, that we wouldn't end with a lot of articles. So we wanted to have a very broad view. So we included randomized controlled trials, we included systematic reviews, even meta-analysis were good for inclusion, experimental designs, single subject designs, cohort studies, case control studies. So we included all the studies, all the study designs that were relevant to have an idea of the effectivity and the efficiency. And we stopped we started looking into the literature from 1994 to 2015. So these were the inclusion criteria. In case of disagreement between the 2 independent researchers, we had a consensus meeting with all the authors who administered the same data extraction tool, and then we had a discussion whether we include or exclude the article. So we included articles. We included only these articles because we didn't find any meta-analysis, for instance, but we found some systematic reviews, some randomized controlled trials, some controlled clinical trials, mixed method studies we included, and also some qualitative studies. After we have included the articles, we wanted to also control these articles on the quality. And for the systematic reviews, we used the PRISMA checklist. For the randomized controlled trials, we used the concert statement. The clinical trials, we used the trend. For mixed methods, we used the stroke checklist. And for qualitative studies, we used the CASP checklist. And now for the results. Here you see the flow chart of the selection procedure. And we started actually with a lot of articles. Through the databases, we ended with 50,406 different articles, which was a lot. And two independent researchers, they screened these articles based on the title, and then we excluded a lot of them already. Duplicates were removed, so we ended up with 908 different records, and based on the in and the exclusion criteria, we removed 653. At the end, after reading the full articles, we ended up with 28 different studies that were checked on the quality of the studies. So we included 7 systematic reviews, 3 RCTs. There is a little mistake there. The 4 shouldn't be there here. We included 9 clinical trials, 5 qualitative studies, and 4 mixed method studies. And 9 of the studies were of excellent to good quality. 12 of them were moderately in terms of quality, and 5 had a low quality. But we decided to include them all because there were interesting aspects written down in these articles. So now the results, and I organized the results based on the type of the design. So I start with the systematic reviews. So as I said before, we included 7 systematic reviews, and we found strong evidence that job accommodation, so modifying the work in terms of tasks or time and so forth, and communication between stakeholders involved in the process reduces work disability significantly among workers. So this is the most strong evidence. Job accommodation is important, and a good communication structure between all stakeholders has a significant impact on work disability. We found moderate evidence on if you start with an early intervention, ergonomic work site visits, the presence of a return to work coordinator, and multi-component interventions consisting of education, physical therapy, occupational therapy, vocational rehabilitation, and so forth, reduces work disability and sickness absence. But this evidence was not that strong. It was moderate evidence. So yeah, we can discuss about that. And we found some low evidence that interventions improve the quality of life of the employees, not that strong, and that behavioral therapy with a work disability, for workers with a work disability, reduces absence and work disability. This is also a very interesting aspect, that if you start with behavioral therapy, that reduces the absence, which is very interesting to know, although the evidence was not that strong. Now, these were the results from the systematic reviews. From the randomized controlled trials, these were not included in the systematic reviews. It's important to say that because these randomized controlled trials were published after the last systematic review. And in addition to the information from the systematic reviews, we found that also sickness absence and disability costs are reduced by active participation of the employee and involvement of different stakeholders. So here was the first evidence that there is a possibility to reduce the disability costs. A second aspect, that if there is a case manager at the work spot, at the workplace, this has a very positive effect on return to work. People can go faster back to their work when there is someone taking care and managing the aspect of getting back to the workplace as soon as possible. Then a third aspect, whether I discussed in the previous slide, that cognitive behavioral approaches have some positive effect. they have also negative effects. But here it's described that they have a negative effect on the functional status of individuals. And this is something we should take in consideration if we apply also cognitive behavioral approaches in our multi-component therapy. And then a fourth aspect, as a result from the randomized controlled trials, that the disability management program shows a quicker return to work, improvement also of quality of life after 1 year follow-up, and even after 6-year follow-up, cost effectiveness. So there is a second aspect on the cost effectiveness that has been described in these randomized controlled trials. And this is also very interesting. For sure, for our government, if they see these kinds of aspects as important components and characteristics of a disability management program, then they have some kind of an incentive to go forward and to train more return to work coordinators, to implement case managers at the workplace, and to facilitate physiotherapy and occupational therapy and refund it because it's cost effective. Now the results from the clinical trials and the mixed methods, we put them together because there was too many information or too much information to share it through this slide. But through these clinical trials and these mixed method studies, we also saw that early intervention, that has been described before in other studies, and also ergonomic worksite visits with case management, teamwork in the organization, trust in colleagues by the employee, reduces absence duration. So we have some kind of a validation of the studies in the randomized controlled trials and in the systematic reviews. So our body of knowledge is growing, and we became more and more aware that a disability management program is effective and efficient. And then we also want to include before I go further to the qualitative results. Also here, the early intervention, ergonomic worksite visits, and the case management not only reduces absence duration, but it also has an effect on patient satisfaction. So the patient was more satisfied of the process of return to work than in other situations. So there was some kind of a comparison in this study between two groups, and this made it very interesting that patients were also satisfied by following a disability management program. And then we also wanted to include some qualitative studies because we wanted to know more about what are the aspects and the components that are important for disability management. Now, in these qualitative studies, we saw that disability management and the programs, it's a very broad concept, sometimes nebulous and not always defined so well. So there is some ambiguity in how to define disability management. So there is really a need, I think, for some kind of an international consensus on how we are going to define disability management so that we can work all in the same way and from the same perspective, in the same view, starting from the same viewpoints and incorporating the same components and characteristics, and in getting involved the same group of stakeholders and so forth. So that's a little bit ambiguous at this time. But what we know from the evidence now, that is that a return to work coordinator, sometimes it's defined as a case manager, sometimes as a return to work coordinator, sometimes these are two different persons having other competences, having other things that they have to do and so forth. But important is that a return to work coordinator is an essential figure. Someone needs to take the lead in helping the person getting back to his work as soon as possible. And this return to work coordinator needs specific competences, and a lot of competences. He needs to have a lot of knowledge about legislation, about physical disabilities, about cognitive disabilities. He needs to be aware of functional capacity evaluation, assessment forms, and so forth. So he needs a lot of knowledge, and he needs to have a lot of skills and attitudes. One of the skills and one of the attitudes that he really needs is his focus should be on return to work the entire time, from the beginning to the end. It must be something like a built-in feature of a return to work coordinator is someone who is involved with return to work all the time with his patients, clients, or whatever you call them. The return to work coordinator needs also a lot of organizational and administrative skills. A lot of people do have a positive attitude and have a lot of competences regarding how to guide, how to enable persons to get the focus on return to work and so forth, but don't have the organizational and administrative skills. So this is also a very important aspect. The return to work coordinator needs assessment skills. He needs to be able to assess the functional capacity of individuals. He needs to be able to assess the demands from the job, which is a totally different skill from assessing a person towards his, let's say, his physical and cognitive capabilities. He needs to be very communicative, so the communication skills are very important. Also, because as a return to work coordinator, you are some kind of a buddy who is working with the patient all of the time. You build up a relation, a very strong relation with your client. So you need to have some interpersonal relation skills. You need to be able to resolve conflicts, because in a period of 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on the length of the program and the need of rehabilitation, for instance, there will be problems and there will be conflicts. So you need to be able to resolve them. So problem resolving skills, conflict resolution skills are also very important. And the last but not least, return to work facilitation skills, specific skills to aim towards return to work. So a lot of competences are necessary for the return to work coordinator. This was also very important for our government to see how they could organize a disability management program and train healthcare professionals and welfare professionals to be a good return to work coordinator. So a lot of courses are into our program now. Now, just to conclude and to discuss a little bit, we know from the articles that disability management is effective and also efficient. Although disability management still remains a broad and ambiguous concept, so we need to work a little bit on that. Inevitable components for a good disability management program is job accommodation, facilitation of transitional duty, so in the period between the disability and return to work. Communication between all stakeholders is very important. Healthcare professional advice is also very important. Early intervention, we know. Goodwill and trust in the stakeholders, communication between the stakeholders. And a return to work coordinator is very important, but he needs an appropriate education. This is in short the conclusion of our study. However, we also have, of course, some shortcomings in the study. We now have reviewed the components and the efficiency and the effectiveness, but our article does not give straightforward information of how these components can be applied in the real world. So other research is necessary to be sure how to apply it in the real world. We are working on that, but we are not there yet. What we know now for sure, that is that a multi-stakeholder perspective is inevitable. And this perspective involves a close collaboration between everyone, the employee, the employer, government, PT, OT, other welfare and healthcare professionals, psychologists, and so forth. Everyone who has some impact on the person, who could get him faster back to work, is an important stakeholder to enable return to work. So this is the conclusion, and a little bit discussion about our entire study that we performed. And this is the end actually of my presentation. I hope I have given you some information that is worth to share. I'm open for questions, open for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was so interesting. I loved your finding because they're just so important for us healthcare professionals to really help with making sure that the interventions that we provide are effective. Very important. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I want to ask something about the need for functional capacity evaluation. Can
Okay.
you share that with us?
Yeah, I can share you a little bit about that. We have at this moment we are actually working and trying to find out what is the most effective functional capacity evaluation, because there are a lot of them. You have a lot of tools, a lot of instruments, a lot of high-tech tools, a lot of low-tech tools to assess the functional capacity of individuals, and we came to the conclusion that you don't need high-tech functional capacity evaluations to have a clear idea about what is the capacity of the person and what are the demands from the job. There are some very low-tech instruments, just some question-answer assessments that give in a short period a very good image of, is this person capable of doing the job? For instance, you have the instrument that has been developed in Switzerland. It's called the WORK. And work is not written with a K at the end, but with a Q. It's the work questionnaire, and it questions based on the ICF core set, vocational rehabilitation, whether the person has the skills or doesn't have the skills to do the job that he is performing. And through this easy to administer assessment form, you have a pretty good idea about the functional capacity evaluation, but it's only an indication. If you want really to have the exact comparison between the demands from the job and the capacities of the individual, you need to go to the workplace, see how the workplace is organized, and then try to find out whether the person is capable to do the job there at the work spot itself. If you cannot do that, you can do it with a functional capacity evaluation such as the ergo kit, for instance, the ergo kit, and then you try to simulate the situation that is on the job. You try to simulate it in your own rehabilitation center. It's not as valid as if you do it on the workplace, but it gives you a pretty good idea. And what we are doing now is trying to find out what is the most valid, the most reliable way to do a functional capacity evaluation. And we hope to publish that as soon as possible, so that we can share this knowledge with the community, because that's interesting, I guess.
No, that's it's very
okay?
interesting.
Yeah.
Because you know, it's one of the tools that that we use when employers, you know, ask us about a client, a worker returning to work.
Yeah.
So back to the paper. Were there any surprises that you found in this analysis, in the systematic work? Were there any surprises?
Actually, yeah, there was some surprises. We were not sure about the cost effectiveness. We thought that a lot of money should be invested in the return to work programs, in the disability management programs, and that it probably wasn't worth it, because a lot of the persons are not able to go back to work. But that wasn't the fact. So we did find some evidence that a good disability management program is cost effective. And this was, it was some kind of surprising, because we started with the idea that 35% of our people with a disability were not able to go back to work and remained unemployed. So it was quite surprising that, yeah, indeed, the disability management programs are effective and efficient. So that was kind of surprising. We didn't expect it, actually, because we were a little bit afraid of that before the government wanted to implement such a disability management program.
That's very interesting. So as we're getting ready to conclude this webinar, are there any last thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
What I would like to share is that I think it's a very important aspect to have these kinds of new information sharing through webinar. I think this is very innovative. It's interesting to do so. People can have the time and in a more relaxed way learn things about aspect that has been written down in scientific journals, scientific papers, which is sometimes, for a lot of people, to my opinion, sometimes a little bit hard to get. Some people are not so keen on reading a lot of scientific papers. They want to do just the job, and they want to get quick wins and quick information gathering. And this webinar is very interesting as a new innovative way to share knowledge. So this is what I wanted to share for sure. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this knowledge in this way. And with regard to the article, it was, and now I'm speaking on behalf of my co-authors, doing a systematic review is a lot of work, but it gives you so much information on a short notice that systematic reviews are very, very interesting, and they gave us a lot of information, a lot of new information, and I'm glad to share it with you.
Thank you so much. And you know, we started this Learn at Work series just for some of the reasons that you mentioned, we really want to get the knowledge out that's published in the journal work. And we're
Yeah,
grateful to you as an author and other authors to share their work in this digital medium. So in just
yeah.
a few days, your webinar will be in our Learn at Work YouTube channel for others
Okay.
to listen to. And I thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing your
yeah.
expertise with us, and I wish you the best. And we'll conclude this webinar now.
Okay, so thank you very much, and I wish also to thank my co-authors because I was not involved on my own in this entire project, so credits go also to them. So thank you again, and hope to meet you again, hope to see you again, hope to read you, and hope to publish again in work later on.
Thank you so much. Take care.